Hey, welcome to Collectors Roundtable. We've done these before on my YouTube channel. I'm Jim. I'm with CGC Sports Illustrated. So thank you for joining us. We're doing this live right now. So wherever you're watching, if you have any questions or comments, definitely post them into the live browser, and I'll do my best to answer those. Going to talk about a number of things today because there's a lot of big news happening in the world of graded magazines. CGC just announced today that they are accepting JSA authentication for magazine and pulps. So we'll run through that a little bit. Still the biggest news in graded magazines that all of us are waiting on is PSA and them to start grading. So we'll touch on that. We'll do some show and tell with the participants here and show off some of our slabs and have some conversations about that. We'll talk about different publications and whatever the hell else happens. So, let's go around. I got two people joining me today, Tony and Ferd. Tony, why don't you start? Just give us a quick little rundown of what you're all about in this hobby.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me, James. Appreciate it. Good to see you. Tony Fix is my name. I live in Minnesota. Go by Blue Green Artifacts. I at one point put some YouTube content on, and maybe we'll do that in the future. But you can find me on eBay and Instagram is where my social presence is right now. But yeah, I started out.
What's your throw out your eBay and your Instagram handle real quick. You might as well.
Sure. Instagram is Blue Green Artifacts. My eBay, I think it is Tony Smurf right now, if I'm not mistaken. But they're linked together. If you go to one, you should be able to get to the other. So, but yeah. I'm just all in on magazines, have been for a while, kind of switched over from comics, have a further back history in sports. My dad and uncle were Sports Illustrated. My uncle had the full run when I was 17 years old. So loving that the market's developed, that the hobby has grown. It's just loving that it's like the Wild West, that you can go find things. It's a little harder now maybe than it was 3-4 years ago, but you can still go find things for $5-10 that are worth much more than that.
Yeah, and that's a great point. I want to give Ferd a chance to talk about himself for a second, but I do want to go back to that because I love that both of you guys kind of have a strong comic background, because most of what I do with these roundtables and people I talk to come from sports cards. And I just want to talk about that difference and how each bring a different view to this portion of the hobby. So let's remind me to do that after we talk to Ferd. Ferd, give us a little rundown of what you're all about.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me on. I know it's been a while since we've been trying to do this for quite some time. So finally, pretty excited to be on the channel. I like Tony. I have a background in comic book collecting. I'm kind of venturing away from that and focusing more on the magazine aspect. Sports is pretty fascinating to me too. I mean, I grew up with sports and all that, and but I've been kind of venturing more on the magazine side with like video games and strategy guides, that what have you. But with sports, I like to really dive into not so much the first covers, but the first like mentions or the first article of like said player. And that's been really challenging. It's I don't know if there'll ever be a market for it because it definitely hasn't started yet, but it's definitely a lot more interesting to me than like comics lately. And that's kind of what I've been diving into as of the past few months. So yeah, I'm really excited to be on the show.
Yeah, talk about that a little bit, because that really, the concept of collecting based on what's inside the book really is strong in the comic world, correct?
Extremely strong, right? I mean, Tony, you're on shows you've been on, I've learned a lot from what you've been, from what knowledge you've presented too. And so that's kind of where I got the idea from it. It's kind of hard to confirm that so much, but you just kind of have to trial and error type thing. But yeah, it's very invaluable to comic book collectors, like the first mentions of a Spider-Man or of a Spawn, what have you. So
right, the origin of Thanos, maybe in a specific comic book, even though Thanos isn't on the cover, it's super collectible in the comic book world because of what's on the inside. And I think that's really interesting because that hasn't been the case yet And maybe it'll develop that way in sports magazines. Maybe it won't. But that hasn't been the case. Right now, sports magazines, for as young a hobby as it is, it's all about the cover for the most part as it comes to the marketplace.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I think for comics, it's pretty split right now. Comics has become more and more cover centric. People really care about what's on the cover more than the guts. There's a lot of comic collectors who don't read them anymore. Honestly, they just pick them up for investment purposes, for speculation, for beautiful artwork or a first appearance on the cover, and they never crack them open. Of course, first the things in the guts are still important, but I think it is shifting a lot.
Let's talk a little bit about, and I don't want to spend this whole time talking about comics, but I'm fascinated by it. And I mean, I have a little bit of comic background, but I'm the farthest thing from a comic guy. But I follow it closely as I follow sports cards closely, even though I don't collect sports cards anymore either, because both of them impact the graded magazine hobby so much. Talk a little bit about where, as comic books are such a mature hobby, can either of you guys talk about that a little bit? Because Tony, when you and I, before we started the live, talked a little bit about how it's really still the Wild West in magazines. But that's not the case in comics. Just speak on that a little bit because it fascinates me.
Yeah, I think, the hobby, each hobby has its own size, right? Sports cards is the 800-pound gorilla. In the collectibles world, I think sports cards, if you look up any individual card, you could find almost 1,000 listings for it, right? There's just so many out there. Comics is not close to sports cards, but yes, if there's any collectible comic book, the chance of you having the only one is very small. There's no new roads to go down necessarily, unless it's with brand new comics that are just coming out, and then people race to be the first one to market. But then, the audiences are fickle, so the attention shifts. I think there are ways that they cross over, but obviously, just like from sports cards to magazines, not all comic collecting strategies are going to ever work in the magazine world. Ferd can speak on this too, but in comics, we don't really care what the title is. We don't care who published it. We just care what's on the cover or what importance the book has. Where that's one thing that I think a lot of comic people really have to grasp when they get into magazines. They might find an early appearance of, their favorite guy. I hate to mention Jordan because anything with Jordan on it can be valuable, but
right.
Say I'm a Minnesota guy. So a Kevin Garnett, if I find a magazine, an early Kevin Garnett magazine compared to the first Sports Illustrated magazine, it has a different weight. Obviously, magazines are much more title centric, right? You've talked about that on your channel many times. It's Sports Illustrated, sports magazine. Sports itself is lesser. Time and Newsweek would be lesser, and then you get random. There are so many publications out there. So, focusing on the title instead of just who's on the cover or what's in the guts is a big thing that I think I'm trying to adjust to.
Yeah. Ferd, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, Tony's kind of hit the head on the nail there, but like something else I like to add to that too is, it's using the fundamentals from like comic books towards magazines. Like I said, I don't know if the market is, there's not enough knowledge out there versus like comic books. I mean, there's an app you can look at the first appearance for said character, and so what I see with magazines is like it's really the first inning for me from when I approach it. Like no one's doing it. Like I think you guys are the only guys I talk to, and a few people in my Discord that we talk about magazines, but it's very few compared to comics. And I think the other thing too about magazines versus comics is comics are very, it's a slowly, like, it's not a growing market. You have to find people that know about comics, and it's not as cool as it used to be. But my nephew, who's like 9 years old, he's 12 now, but he knows like I'll use an example. Bronny. Bronny was on that Phase-In video game group or whatever, and he had to have the magazine for that. And I didn't even know what the heck it was, but I picked it up and put it in my little magazine box. That it crosses so many different genres of hobby or sport or recreational deals. I mean, you have the arguably one of the greatest players of all time, son on one of the greatest video game teams ever. So it's a very interesting market. There's so much information out there, and it's growing. I mean, people still, even though this age of digital, right? People still want that piece of that relic, to hold and to look at when they're thinking about their favorite player like Shohei or Ohtani or like an MJ.
I think relic's a great term to use, and I may end up stealing that, Ferd, because I love that, because there is value in the physical item. I can't display a social media post from LeBron James or a video clip of him dunking or something like that,
right?
But I can certainly display a magazine cover. Hector had a question. He said, magazine first app based. I wonder if magazines will ever have key issues like comics. One of you guys jump in on that, and then I'll give you some thoughts on that when you guys are done.
Yeah, I think they do. There are key issues for magazines. It's very much, like we said, title based. So first Sports Illustrated cover, and then for Sports Illustrated pro cover, sometimes if it's a big enough athlete. And then if it's if we're talking Michael Jordan, there are some interior things and some off Sports Illustrated magazines that people chase. I think the keys are developing, though. There'll be more and more, whether it's, I know you've talked about that too. Like if you see if there's an action shot and down in the bottom corner, you can see a little image of one player, but then maybe the next year they got a feature cover. Both of those in comics, we would almost call that like a cameo and a first appearance.
Right.
But yeah, I think there's definitely key issues with magazines. It's probably even a little more clear what is a key. Sometimes it's very ambiguous with comics, what is a key and what isn't.
Yeah, and to add what Tony was saying, like I literally have a database of just random, type of, like, whether it be the first appearance of Shohei in a Sports Illustrated, which I have right here in front of me. I'll show you guys later.
Oh no, get it. Well, let's not wait. If you got it close by, grab it. I'd love to see it.
Yeah, so it's not the best grade, but I have about 5 copies of this, and the reason I know this is the first American interview of Shohei is because it literally says in the guts, this is our first interview of Shohei stateside, but it's a Sports Illustrated here, and if you can, I don't know if you can see, but it shows there's a Shohei. It basically indicates, CGC indicates that Shohei is in the magazine, but they don't necessarily state whether it's his first appearance or not.
Interesting.
But reading the article, it's his first interview, or what have you. And then I just brought this for fun. You guys know this book, but it's the first appearance inside of Michael Jordan.
Yeah, which is that. I love that issue because that's Isaiah Thomas's first cover appearance when he was in Indiana, and so that makes there's a certain level of collectability in there. But yeah, that issue is the first interior appearance for Michael Jordan in a copy of Sports Illustrated. And I'm fascinated. Ferd, I love that you're into the interior because I keep waiting to see if that develops in the marketplace the way it's developed in the comic book space.
Yeah. And I would say, just to add on to that, like for me, and I think Tony can say, and I'd say Half Price Crook, Jessup's in the chat. What's up, Jessup? Like that's more exciting for me to collect versus a first cover. And so for me, like I'm going to collect the first, mention inside like and it's a lot of research you have to do, right? Because it's a little more digging.
Yes.
And I'm not really very keen on the first cover. It's still cool, and no hate about that. But I feel like I get more collectible value out of the first appearance versus the first cover. That's just me though. So
I think on that topic though, the way that we in comic world think about first appearance, it can be very defined, right?
Mhm.
If you're talking about a Marvel superhero, there's only so many Marvel comics out there. You just have to figure out, okay, this one came out on this date. This one came out 2 weeks earlier. So
Mhm.
it may be a smaller appearance, but this is his first appearance. Where I don't know, there's some of those questions with magazines that will ever answer.
Mhm.
I don't think
And
you
Tony,
can ever guarantee that it's a first appearance.
and
You know,
Tony,
just-
are you saying that because there's so many different publications and so many
Yes,
regional?
yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that, and that's kind of that I think that does hold that back a little bit because you are. I mean, I pressed a I think it was called The Mirror, Mirror sports magazine for somebody that had a picture of Michael Jordan on the cover in his Carolina uniform. I had never seen that this piece existed until a month ago. So there's all these kind of smaller and regional publications out there that it is difficult to track all of that. And the hobby isn't anywhere near as mature as what comic books are. I mean, for comics, I can just do a quick Google search to find out whatever sort of, first appearance or cameo I want and get the answer. You're just not going to get that right.
Right. Yeah, I think we need to think of magazines where each title is its own collecting space. So like we were just talking about this in chat earlier. We saw the image of the new Wembanyama Sports Illustrated cover coming out this coming month. It's his first cover in a pro uniform, right?
Yep.
So the label, if we're getting the label that we want on CGC, should say Victor Wembanyama first pro cover, correct?
Yep, correct.
But one of the people in chat pointed out, yeah, he did have a pro cover in Slam a few months ago. But again, each title is its own thing. There's going to be first pro cover, first pro Sports Illustrated cover. There would be first pro Slam cover. Those could be separate collectibles in their own right.
And to CGC's credit, and I rip on CGC a lot, and so I always like to be fair and give them props when they do something right. They are making that delineation in a lot of label notes. For example, Caitlin Clark's first Slam cover says first Caitlin Clark Slam cover. And so they make that distinction by the publication, but you're exactly right about that. Let's kind of move forward because I think there's a couple of big things that people asked me to talk about for this. Let's talk about the big news today, and that is CGC came out and announced that JSA autograph authentication is now live for both pulps and for magazines. Big deal for those of you that are new in the hobby. Let me give you a quick rundown. CGC is the only place that grades magazines. CGC has always treated autographs on magazines essentially as a defect. They've had what they call the signature series program, which is very cool, very difficult to achieve because a signature series witness must be present when that item is signed, and then your magazine or your comic stays with the CGC witness and it goes off to get graded. So it's been very difficult for sports magazine collectors. CGC, in anticipating PSA grading magazines in 2025, purchased JSA. You've been able to get comics authenticated, autographs authenticated with JSA. Today, magazines are now live. So that's the setup. Tony, I want to turn it over to you because you have a comic that shows what it looks like, and I want to dig into that. And if you could show that,
Yes.
that'd be awesome.
Yep. As soon as it did launch, I think in June for comics.
Yep.
So as soon as it launched, I had a stack of signed comics. Previous to this, CBCS did verified signatures where it was quite expensive. It was a good $50, $60 a book. But they would verify the signature. It would get a regular gold label. It would say on the label that it's a verified copy. But yes, as soon as in the comic space, at least CBCS versus CGC are not very close. The identical grade, a 9.8 CBCS could be 30% less money than a CGC. CGC is just the king of the hill. So we've been waiting for this, and yeah, this is what it looks like. It's the traditional gold label. They add the little extra black at the top. The label, the way it looks, has gotten good reviews. Since then, you can get you can choose to get the actual autograph graded as well.
Oh, really? Like a number grade?
Yep.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Just like TSA does sports cards, I can get a number grade on my auto, and then a separate
Correct.
number grade on the collectible. Got it.
Yeah, I think if they do the number grade, I'm not sure if it shows up in the notes or down below in the box. They do pre-screen, so if you have you done pre-screen before?
I haven't, because it wasn't always available to magazines until
Yeah.
recently, and I haven't had an instance where I've needed to do that.
It doesn't really make a lot of sense in magazines because lower grades are very much accepted in magazines, where comics sometimes they have no value unless they're a 9.6 or a 9.8.
Correct.
I think in sports magazines, the only instance it makes sense to me is ultra modern pieces. For example, if I've just got the Angel Reese's on the current cover of Sports Illustrated, there's going to be a ton of them graded. The value on a 9.6 or a 9.4 isn't going to be much, in my opinion, on that piece. So that one may make sense where I send it in for a pre-screen at 9.8. Here's the other issue with magazines. Recently, CGC moved pre-screen to include 9.9 for comic books.
Yeah.
And I think maybe even 10, although I'm not sure about that. That's not an option for magazines. If there was a 9.9 pre-screen for magazines, then again, it may be something that makes sense for ultra modern pieces.
I could see them rolling that out because they'll just take your money. You're not going to get a 9.9, but sure, we'll take the $8. Why not?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Somebody, I want to show this one. So Jay Sut asked in the chat here, do you know if PSA grades magazines? Just for those that are coming into the hobby and are fairly new, they've announced that they will start grading both comics and magazines in Q1 2025. Now, they had hoped originally when they started working through this initiative a year and a half ago, they had hoped to be up and running by now. So that date has already been pushed back once. It's not an easy proposition ramping this up. So Q1 2025 is the date that they've told me. I wouldn't be surprised if they miss that date and have to push it back, but that's what it is for right now. Let's take that as an opportunity to move into that topic. Let's talk a bit about PSA starting to grade magazines. I'm interested in your opinion on this, because PSA is going to grade comics and magazines. And so from a comic collector's perspective, where do you see PSA in the marketplace as it relates to grading comics?
Yeah, I mean, I think and I'm kind of borrowing a little bit of info from a gentleman I do the podcast with on Sundays for my show. He thinks it's a big opportunity for PSA to do collaborations with like streetwear companies, and to for example, there's like I don't know, Kith is like a really well-known, and then they actually PSA did this a while back. They're a really well-known streetwear company. And so he's saying, like, what if Kith put out like a Spawn comic book, and PSA had the rights to grade it? They have those kind of business connections. So I think there's the opportunity with collectors. Now, in the general space, Tony, you can probably attest to this too. I don't really like the way PSA looks for my comic books, and that sounds really weird, but like comic book collectors are weird in that respect. And I when it comes to all cross collectibles, I like CGC with my magazines, my comics, my video games, my Pokemon cards that I get to like my little niece and nephews. But like, I think PSA was a little late to the game. It looks kind of bland to me, like the kind of different PSA magazine slabs that they put out for just kind of previews. So for me, I'm going to pass on PSA personally, and then also, like, I don't know.
Now, let me ask you about that. Are you passing on PSA for comics, or are you passing on them for pop culture and sports magazines as well?
I'm passing on all collectibles.
Okay,
I personally haven't really. I just don't like the way they look.
And look,
so.
that has been the single biggest complaint, and you're exactly right. Comic book collectors, more so than sports card collectors, care about how the label looks, how the slab looks. And PSA has the worst slabs. I mean, for sports cards. I mean, PSA sports card slabs, CGC slabs are better, SGC slabs are better, BGS slabs are better. I mean, how so obvious, and yet PSA slabs command a 15 to 25% premium for every else for the exact same card in the exact same grade. So obviously the point has been proven that sports card collectors don't really care how bad the slab looks because they're willing to pay a premium for it over better looking slabs. But comics are totally different, and those comic guys just hate that PSA slab and really love the look and feel of the CGC slabs.
Yeah, I think it's a matter of who's first to market, right? CGC was the first. They didn't make up the grading system. They actually adopted and kind of modified it a little bit. The old Overstreet comic book price guide grading system.
Yep.
That's been around for generations now.
Right. FN plus, F plus. Yeah. The old new alpha grading scale that they had.
Right.
Yeah.
But they were the first to put, they were the first to put any publication in a slab. They were the first to make the labels. So their labels have, evolved over the years. But I think with publications, that's just what people, they're the Coca-Cola. Anybody else is a competitor. There are more grading companies than CGC and CBCS. When there is a new grading company that enters, a lot of people kind of sit on the sidelines and wait. They wait to see if there's any, bad press about, their grading seems to be erratic, or the comparable prices are much lower. So why even waste your money by putting them in this slab instead of that slab? And I think PSA has that same first to market on the cards, whether their slabs and labels are appealing or not. That's just what you want a PSA 10. Nobody's going to make up a new grading system. They're going to use what PSA has started and tweak it perhaps. But everyone in the card market's going to have to compete against PSA. Everyone in the publication market's going to have to compete against CGC. I do think sports magazines kind of fall right in the middle, like you said, because there are a lot of sports magazine collectors who come from cards. So they're okay with that label, and they like that just, the thought, PSA, that it just rolls off the tongue, right? If you're that kind of collector. So it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see how it plays out.
Ferd, I think what you mentioned earlier is fascinating. If PSA can partner with companies like you mentioned, streetwear companies, to produce a Spawn exclusive piece that can only be distributed and graded through PSA, that's powerful. And I think that's really probably PSA's best chance to make as much inroads as possible into the comic book side of the thing. And I hadn't heard that before, but I think it's a fascinating business strategy on PSA's part.
Yeah. It's pretty interesting. Like, I never thought of that. Like, I think Tony can attest this too. Like, whenever a comic book cross brands into a different subculture, like Eminem there's an Eminem cover that of a couple years ago that came out, and
the Spider-Man
bonkers. Yeah. The Spider-Man.
Yeah. Love that one. Love it.
Went bonkers. Eminem, if you guys don't know, is a huge comic book fan. So, I mean, you cross subculture, hip hop and comic books, and it's just, it was a great flip, honestly. So yeah.
So let's take it then to sports magazines. And Ferd, we got your feedback on that. But Tony, where are you going to be when PSA comes around in Q1 2025 and you got some sports magazines to send in? Who are you going with, CGC or PSA?
That's a good question. I collect for myself. I do have some books that are for my personal collection. I've kind of changed from a hoarder mentality where I just want to have everything myself. I'm going to pass all these things on to my kids. I'm going to have, boxes and boxes in the storeroom downstairs. I'm getting a little old with that. I think it's more interesting for me to keep moving. So if I'm buying something, I am thinking of how it will sell. I am thinking of the market for it. If I can sell it immediately, this is something that, when is the right time to sell? If a player becomes, a hot commodity. So I am thinking with the selling mentality. So that the market price is going to be the biggest factor for me. If PSA magazines turn out to start selling at the same level that CGC magazines sell, I guess I have nothing against it whatsoever. I've sent plenty of cards into PSA. But yeah, I think I'll wait and see for at least the first 6 months, see what happens.
Yeah, I think that's what I hear from most collectors, and that's what I get asked a lot. Hey, Jim, what are you going to do when PSA comes on board? And my response is, well, I'm an early adopter. This is what I do. I love all of this, so of course I'm going to try out PSA immediately. Day one, I'll be sending some stuff in. That doesn't mean I'm committed to PSA long term. They've got to prove themselves. And if they can fix some of the problems that CGC had, and it seems like PSA is really focusing on their slabs. As they, from a competitive standpoint, PSA sees CGC slabs as a major weakness. And so everything I've heard is that PSA is building an even sturdier slab, a more tamper-resistant slab. There's even rumors that you'll have an option to buy a UV-protected slab directly from PSA. So I think that they're putting a lot of effort into that. But yes, I will be going with PSA immediately. However, nobody knows. And so it's going to be a wait and see. I'm going to experiment, but I really have no idea what this is going to do to the market and where we are 6 months or a year from now, more like a year from now. I have no idea.
Yeah. What has been the death of some of the competitors that have come up, PGX is the worst culprit with that. I worry that if PSA focuses too much just on the label, just on the slab, what it looks like, they better not take their eye off the ball of grading. Because if people start submitting magazines that CGC has as a 9.4 and then you cross grade and magically it's a 9.8 now, you lose. Yes, it's sure nice to get a 9.8, but you lose a lot of legitimacy. You come across, at least on the comic side, when companies do that, they really come across as fake graders. Oh, we're going to give you higher graders because we want you to use us. If you don't have that authenticity, if you don't have that credibility within the market, you get a lot of bad press. You get a lot of negativity and mocking, and no matter how beautiful your slab is or your label is, they better not take their eye. They better focus on that. That should be the first thing, even if their label, their slabs are not the most beautiful in the world. That has to be the first, the most important topic. In my mind.
Yep. Good points on that. I want to run through these questions because I'm really backed up on some comments here. Hector says, you guys think numbered magazines like Slam Metals will increase in the future if the hobby grows, become more like the card hobby? Thoughts on that from both of you?
Oh my God, yes. Yeah. Think of a comic book or a sports card that is numbered up to 90. Mm-hmm. I mean, for a major player, if it's their first appearance or first cover or first pro cover, that is an extremely low number. So those numbered medals now have some value, but the more, there aren't going to be any more copies of that. Usually in publications, you're talking in comic books. If we think of 1,000 print run, that's low, let alone something 30 copies of a platinum. Oh my God. That's crazy low number. What do you think, Ferd?
Yeah, I mean, I think the advantage that magazines have over comics as well is that the publisher is control of the print run versus like said shop that can be like a 50 print run, right? So it makes it, to me, coming from comic books or kind of crossing over to magazines, like when I see those metal slams, at like a print run of 50 or 100, I'm like, that's it. There's no more of that specific, deal. And then just kind of like what I've talked about in the past, the collectibles, digital is like here, and that's how people consume the most stuff. So what I've been seeing lately is that like people will buy digital subscriptions of like said newspaper, magazine, publication, but they're still going to want that Caitlin Clark, that Chet Holmgren, Wembanyama, like platinum magazine, and they're going to pay premium for it. So I think, and these companies have to stay alive too, so they have to incentivize people to consume their product too. So I think it's a great collectible, and it's easy to latch onto. So definitely.
Yeah, I think it was interesting. The PSA, before they even announced that they were going to start grading magazines, there's a PSA magazine that if you're a Collectors Club member at PSA, you get it. And all of a sudden, like 6-8 months ago, they started putting out short prints, 1 of 500, 1 of 100, 1 of 1s that were randomly inserted to subscribers that you could get. And they were kind of tipping their hand on all of that. So yeah, I'm with you on that. I think that I think numbered magazines are just going to become more prevalent. Is there ever been a numbered comic book?
They're like Kickstarter comic books, something that's a super small, super niche. We wish we had more numbered, because there's a lot of trust issues where retailers do exclusives and they advertise 500 print run, and then the 500 sell out, and then magically they'll be selling them at cons the next year as well. So we have a lot of trust issues. We're jealous of the numbered sports cards, the guarantee you have with that. So it's nice to have that.
Next question. Jay Sutt says, I collect programs. I don't know if these are considered magazines, and can they be graded? CGC will pretty much grade anything as long as it fits in the slab. And the slab dimensions are on their website, and they keep changing because they've actually gotten slightly bigger. And so I think it's like 11 7/8 by 8 3/4 or something. I don't know. It's something like that. So yes, game programs, as long as they fit in the slab, they can be graded. I've seen TV guides in CGC slabs, which are a little weird. TV Guide, for those that aren't old enough to remember, TV Guide was this tiny little publication. But it's still, in CGC slabs, it's still in the full slab. So you've got this massive dead space all around. But yes,
you've got a couple of those. Yeah.
Programs can be graded. I've got Michael Jordan's first TV Guide cover appearance sitting in my stack of stuff somewhere. Nice. It's not in great shape, but it's just never risen to the level on my priority list to get graded. But I've got Michael Jordan's first TV Guide cover sitting around there somewhere. Let's go to the next question. BT in Columbus, will PSA coming into the space expand the community in collecting comics and magazines? Why don't you guys dig into that real quick?
Go ahead, I guess I'll start off real quick. I don't know if that will. I think more so the limited print runs, because those are sexier, right? I don't think a lot of people know what graded means. Like if I were to post like a graded Slam magazine that was graded versus a platinum version of a Slam magazine, I bet you like 10 out of like 100 of my friends would know what a graded is versus like the other 90. They would more so know what the ungraded version is, and it's expensive too. That's the other thing too, I think. So that's my opinion on that.
Yeah, I think it's a big ask to think that sports, strictly sports collector is going to jump into comics. I think it's interesting. They're probably curious about the values of this and that. But if you talk about story a lot in your videos, James, and I think you have to have a passion for whatever you're collecting. If you grew up with video games, you love finding vintage video game stuff, right? Yep. If you grew up with a dad who, got you Sports Illustrated subscriptions when you're in high school, you love that. And if you didn't grow up loving comics and loving the superhero thing, it's hard to develop that just because it's, strategically a good idea or there's a few, but I think magazines are I can see other titles growing, but jumping all the way to comics, I'm not so sure about that.
Yeah, you're right. You know, we're very impressionable when we're kids. And this has been known in the music industry, which I spent a long time in the music industry. What you listen to and you like when you're 15 to 20, that's pretty much what you like the rest of your life for the most part. And the same thing goes with collectibles and that sort of stuff. Half Price Cook had an interesting thing, and I get this a lot, and so I want to clarify it. He says, have a good friend who has been with PSA since Jump, and they are all over the place with cards. I see a lot of people that assume that whatever PSA is doing with cards, whether it's good or bad, that will be replicated with magazines. And I think that that's a very I wouldn't do that if I were you. And I have a fairly deep knowledge of the inner working of how they're setting this up because I've been working with PSA in this process. This is a completely separate division. The comics and magazines is a completely separate division from sports cards. It's got separate leadership. It's got a separate P&L. It's got graders that are completely separate. Sports card graders are not going to be grading comics and magazines. In fact, they call it their pop culture division within PSA. They've got their sports card division, they've got their pop culture division, and magazines and comics are part of the pop culture division. Different executive that runs it. Elizabeth runs the pop culture division. She's been great. I know her fairly well. So I wouldn't, and the graders they hired are, from what I've been told, are former CBCS graders. So they're not sports card graders. So I think that everybody needs to get this mentality of whatever is good or bad with PSA on the sports card side will be good or bad on the comic and magazine side. I just don't see that being the case because I see a lot of separation and delineation on that. Tom Harrison, Tom, I know you're my hockey brother in Canada, bud, and you're a little upset that we're doing this tonight when McDavid and Bedard are playing. So I apologize for that. Guys, let's dig into because I'm afraid we're going to run out of time. Let's dig into a little show and tell. And Tony, why don't you start off? Because I know we're going to do a quasi live unboxing with a box that Tony's got sitting there. So Tony, why don't you run through these? And then Ferd, I definitely want to see some stuff that you've got. And then I've got a couple of things I want to show off too.
Right. All right. Yeah, we've been holding on to this. If you are a fan of Jim's channel, you know he's very good at self-control and waiting until actual opening of the box to know what the grades are. That's not me at all. I've got 3 submissions at CGC right now, and I am probably checking the website 3 times a day just to see what stage they are in. So I know what's here. And we've been the focus and the biggest part of the market for magazines is sports, right? Sports Illustrated.
Yeah, although pop culture is certainly but pop culture is certainly growing, and I'm fascinated by pop culture and political and all that sort of stuff. Yep. But yes, and I love both equally. I would say I didn't jump into sports as early as you did, so not that it's not the Wild West, but there's a path forward on there's a good CGC census count on a lot of the major books on the sports side. On the pop culture side or the magazine side or all these other little niche topics, that's not necessarily the case. So I love that. I love having being the first one to grade something. Love that one. Nice 9.6 on that Taylor Swift.
Yeah, this wasn't the regular time issue. I know you've shown that one, the 3 variants of that on your channel before. This was a special edition. It came out pretty much the same time. There are different printings of this, but I just thought it was there's so many featured Taylor Swift magazines right now. You could go to Barnes & Noble and probably grab 8 different magazines with Taylor Swift on the cover, and they're probably all selling. But again, Time being a bigger name brand, right?
Yeah. While you're moving on to the next one, I do want to talk about that because Time and not with their weekly issues, but some of their other issues generally, they will put out multiple printings, and this is especially critical for the Pokemon Time magazine covers where they had 4 different variants on them. There were multiple printings of that. If that's something you're interested in collecting, be aware that the first printing is going to be the most collectible. Yep. And so when you're purchasing these, either raw or slab, some of these have multiple printings, and it's something the collectors need to be aware of.
Yep. Specifically on the Time, the Pokemon book that he's referring to was this same Time special edition. And down below the barcode, there's different. This one says SPC specials. It doesn't specifically say first or second. You kind of have to look at the date. Display until 3/22/24. There's one that says display until, and then a later date. So you have to do a little research to figure out which one is actually the first printing. But again, it's kind of fun to do that research and
well, and that's where the opportunity is too. This is,
right.
There's so many, we talked about it, so many people collecting comics for so long. It's such a mature industry. Everybody's already done the research. They've already found all the angles that for the most part are to be had. That's not the case in pop culture and sports magazines. If you've got, just a little nugget of an idea and you want to go out, do the legwork on it and find something cool, you may have discovered something that nobody else discovered yet.
Yeah, that is the best feeling, and I've got a couple in here that are on that tip. I'm going to keep going though, so I don't keep talking for an hour and a half. Chet Holmgren is a Minneapolis kid. He went to high school in St. Paul, so I'm not a Thunder fan. Maybe I'll become a Thunder fan. But we brought my son to go see him last year when they came to play the Timberwolves. Love him, love his attitude, love how he's this new unicorn body type skill set, with Wembanyama, the ability to play inside and have moves on the outside. So I've got a number of his that I got graded. I did not get a 9.8 of any of his, but so far. But love these slams. I'm just as big of a slam fan as you are, Jim. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I'm sure you're aware of the quality control issues with Slam, hence the 9.6 there and not the 9.8. And I am, while you're grabbing your next one, I am a big fan of Slam. I have as I described it on a social media post this week, a love-hate relationship with Slam right now. I think what they're producing right now is so much better than what Sports Illustrated or anybody else is producing, yet their quality control is just, my head's going to explode if they don't get that fixed. It's driving me crazy. Oh, gold medal.
Very nice.
Chat. I love it.
Gold. So I sent in 2 golds. This is the highest grade I got of the Chet, 9.4. You've talked about that quite a bit. I don't want to rub it in, Jim, but I know you've talked about your percentage. I have had more success with the medals. I think with counting these 2, I've graded 7 medals and I've gotten back 3 9.8s.
You're making me jealous here. Maybe it's me. Jeez.
Yeah, it might just be chance. I don't know. But yeah, clearly any of these, like you said, they're card stock. So if there's any sort of bend, it's never going away. But like we said, just the fact that there's 90 of these, if you could find a card or a magazine of Michael Jordan that there were only 90 copies total.
Collectability goes through the roof. While you're grabbing the next one, Murph, my Boston buddy, said metal manufactured collectible. How would a collector obtain one of these? Purchased off the website. Yes, the Slam website is the only place that you can purchase Slam metal. They release maybe 2 or 3 a month. In various ones, because sometimes they'll do gold medal is predominantly what they'll do. Sometimes they'll do 1 gold, 1 orange medal for the Celtics championship. They did a green medal. But the Slam website has all that stuff there.
Yeah, they'll usually pick 1 title each month to do a medal of. Gold is their constant. They'll always do 94 golds. Occasionally they'll have a black medal that'll have 60, and every once in a while they'll do a platinum medal that'll have 24, I believe it is, something like that.
Yeah, they've gotten away from that. I think in a couple of years since I've seen them, like when they first started doing this, they would release like a Jordan cover, and it would be red. You could buy the same cover. Metal red was up to 200, gold was up to 94, and like you said, black was 50 or something like that for the LeBron James Space Jam 2. I think they did like 6 or 7 different medals. There was a cosmic medal. There was a platinum medal. They've kind of gotten away from that a little bit. And for the most part, gold is what they do the most of. I think they just did the green medal for the Celtics because they won the championship and their colors are green. But most of it is gold these days.
Unfortunately, the magazine, the one that I want the most is the Anthony Edwards. Being a Timberwolves fan, they did a platinum of his first cover, so 24 copies. It was the same month as that Space Jam. So the print run, even on the regular cover, the non-metal, the print run was tiny compared to everyone, loading up on LeBron James and that. So there have been sales of that platinum Anthony Edwards that have been huge. But anyways, moving on, keep moving. Non-sports. So this is a good example of not a title that anyone has ever heard of. This is a counterculture magazine from the 70s. And going to what Ferd said about things being in the guts, it has nothing to do with the cover. On the very back page of this comic book, this magazine, 1978. The official title of it is Wet, the magazine of gourmet bathing, whatever that means. On the last page is the very first cartoon, the first professional cartoon written by Matt Groening.
Oh, that's awesome. So tell me, did you discover that on your own, or did somebody else discover that and you just found that piece? Because that's what we were talking about earlier, is kind of digging up these little collectible nuggets like that.
There were people aware of it. So the copies I bought were just on eBay. Half of them mentioned they weren't cheap, 100 or 200 for a lot of these copies. But again, if you're most comics most magazines outside of Sports Illustrated are not being graded. Even if people have been buying and selling them, they're just not grading them. If you're not a sports person or a comic book person, you probably don't even know what grading is. So, so I think I was the first one to get them graded, but no, I wasn't the one to discover this.
Got it.
But in the long run, I think it's an important thing, right? I mean,
Absolutely.
Matt Groening, The Simpsons, if you know, his cartoon before The Simpsons was called Life in Hell. And this is the first version of Life in Hell before it had the name Life in Hell, if that makes sense. So the same characters from Life in Hell, but a different title. But yes, I know a few people are chasing this. Who knows how many print run out there? Goodness, it can't be much. But yeah, this is the kind of pop culture stuff that I'm loving.
I'm curious, did you get a slab notation of that being Matt Groening's first appearance of that piece?
I believe I put in the request, but they did not mention it. Oh, no, they did. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
Forbidden words. They don't say first because, again, I would be a little timid to write first appearance or first, I don't want somebody
tough to definitively prove that. Yes.
Right. If somebody the next year finds an earlier copy, so I think early is a better word for that kind of thing. So it does say early published Matt Groening cartoon, which is cool.
Cool. While you're digging with that, I'm going to do a question. I wonder if wrestling, this is Flair for the Gold. I wonder if wrestling magazines will take off as a subset of sports magazine collecting. Already has. Now, keep in mind, sports magazines is tiny compared to comics and sports cards. The subsets within sports magazines are even tinier, but there are wrestling magazines are getting more and more popular. I'm a big fan. I stick to the reputable publications. I stick to the old WWF magazine, WWE magazine, Pro Wrestling Illustrated. There's a couple of others out there that are well known. Also, something I think is very cool are vintage wrestling event programs. I just pressed one recently for a customer that had both Andre the Giant and Hulk Hogan on the cover of this program. It was from 1980. It was an event at Boston Garden. It just was the coolest thing I had seen, and I'm a huge fan of those.
Yeah, wrestling is already up there. If you jump on eBay right now, there's probably 100 plus, wrestling magazines that are graded for sale. Absolutely. All right, I'm gonna keep going.
Yep.
So,
nice.
The Source magazine, there is a market for this already. There was a complete set of Source magazine number 1 through, I think, 140 that sold on one of the auction sites. I think it was Golden, maybe Heritage, for $36,000 a couple of years ago. So it's, there's a lot of history with Source. This goes to what Ferd said about guts. This has nothing to do with the cover at all. There is an interior article in here called Unsigned Hype, where they feature artists who have not been signed to a label yet. So this is the issue that has the Unsigned Hype feature on Eminem.
Oh, that's
so
awesome.
Before it's hard to display, like, unless you tell the story, nobody looking at it is going to know what the importance is. I'm kind of throwing around the idea on some of these that have an interior page where you kind of need to tell the story. You can get individual pages graded.
Yep.
But I thought about finding maybe a really low grade copy. This is my second 9.4. This is the top pop. But finding another low grade copy, pulling the page out, and maybe having them as a set. Like, here's the high grade magazine. Here's the individual page that's inside of it, if that makes sense.
It does. I think that's a good idea. So Source, the two issues that most people ask me about, there's the Eminem's first cover appearance on Source, and then the Biggie Smalls first cover appearance on Source. Those are really what I've seen out there are in super high demand. The
first
very,
dozen.
very difficult to find. And you're exactly right. This is why I get so upset about slab labeling. I am a firm believer that one of the big reasons why graded game tickets took off with PSA is because the story is told on the slab. I'm looking at this Yankees ticket from 1952. Who cares? Oh, right. I look at the slab label. It says Mickey Mantle's first Major League Baseball game. That is so critical. Telling the story about why this is collectible on the slab is so important. And that's why I'm such a stickler and just so all up in CGC's grill about getting these slab labels correctly, because it is so important. And that when I've had my conversations with PSA, when it comes to grading sports magazines and when they're going, that was one of the biggest things that I just hammered home with them. Be generous with slab label suggestions, verify them and vet them, but man, be generous with them like you have with your game ticket grading. Because when you tell the story on the slab label, it's huge. Absolutely.
Yeah, it doesn't hurt, especially in a developing hobby like this, because
sure,
there are comic books that don't have a first, an important character on the cover, but everybody knows. We know that that's important because of this, but there's a lot of education that needs to happen on the magazine side before we get to that point.
Hey Tony, Slam's the same publisher as the Source, right? Same publisher.
I think Slam, the publisher, is listed as Slam Media.
So at one point in time, Slam and Source were both published by Source Media Incorporated, but that is no longer the case. Slam has had 9 different publishers, 9 different publishers since 1995 when they came out. So they've bopped around in ownership and publishing group a lot, but it is no longer, but used to be.
Mm-hmm.
And the Source did have a very short run of a sports publication. Source, I think it was called Source Sports. I don't think it lasted for more than maybe a year, less than 2. But it was a sports magazine. I think Allen Iverson was the first cover. Those are really hard to find. Again, if you're the fun part of digging. All right, I'm going to keep going. I've only got a couple Sports Illustrated, and this isn't a very important one. Honestly, I grabbed this one. It's a subscription, of course, not the wonderful newsstand, but I think I one of the magazines I was getting ready to send out, I found some damage on it that I didn't want to grade it. So I just grabbed the first thing that I thought looked cool. I thought it had a shot at getting higher than a 9.0, but not so much.
No, that's all right. I love, even as a subscription, I love the early Tyson covers. I'm a big Tyson fan, and think his collectability is through the roof. So I love that. Hey, Tony, I'm going to interrupt you because I want to make sure we get to see some of Ferd's stuff. So Ferd, let's take a little break in Tony's portion of it here. And why don't you show us some of what you brought and talk about it a little bit?
Yeah, I got,
because I love that you guys come with this different perspective. The sports part of it is in there, but you guys bring the comic perspective, which is so fascinating to me, and then this pop culture stuff that you're getting graded, I just absolutely love.
Yeah, I have only 5 things I want to show off to the community tonight, and yeah, the chat's been on fire, man. This has been pretty cool. I've been trying to respond to people on the list, so yeah. So I forgot who mentioned programs, but a good friend of ours, I would say, Brad, Southpaw Brad, he sent me this Masters 1997 program. And it's obviously the first Masters that Tiger Woods won. So
that's awesome. I've never seen one of those before. That is very, very cool.
Yeah, and you know, we're talking about like I mentioned earlier the first inning of magazines. You can find copies of this on eBay for like $7.
Oh, that's awesome. I think that's exactly when this is over. That's exactly where I'm going because I got to have one of those. That's awesome. I love how it's green too. I love the color, the fact that it's green, just like the green jacket.
Yeah, I mean, if you do end up getting it, I mean, it's Tiger when he's like 18 or 20, however old he is. It's pretty crazy.
Right. That's awesome. Love
super cheap. This is my Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce play. It's I don't know what's the first cover, but it's the Super Bowl cover of them on People. I just thought it was kind of a fun
piece. One. No, yeah. I think that's a very cool piece because it shows both of them on in a moment that we all remember. We remember watching that Super Bowl. We remember the Chiefs winning and Taylor Swift coming on the field at the end of the game. And I think that captures that you don't see in most others.
Yeah. And the funny thing was, my wife's friend, actually, she's a huge Taylor Swift fan. Like she has the tickets and everything. And she actually told me about this copy. And she's like, you should buy a bunch because when they break up, it's going to be worth. That's what I'm banking on, them breaking up. So
love, banking on that. My retirement's banked on them breaking up and this being worth a fortune. Yeah,
right.
By the way, I looked up your Masters. It looks like there's one currently graded of that Masters program.
Oh,
it is a 9.8. So you're probably your best chance is to tie the top off, but still a good opportunity there.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's no way it's a 9.8, but that's pretty cool. I didn't know it was gradable because it's kind of big. It's kind of a big size, but that's good to know. Someone asked like the first appearance of Taylor Swift, and I know this is confirmed, but I wish Josh was here. But Vanity Fair from August of 2004, she is inside the guts right here. Taylor Swift.
2004. She would have been 15. 16 or something like that. Holy cow. That's a great find. I love that.
Yeah. And this goes for like $10 on eBay. So, and Tony, kind of what your idea, you were talking about, like kind of cutting this out. It's an Abercrombie and Fitch ad, Rising Stars. And so I don't know how it probably is a lot easier to cut this out if you really want to do that kind of strategy.
As soon as you mentioned that, I was about to walk over and grab my copy that's right over there.
I think we all have a copy of this, right?
I already bought a heat gun to see if I could remove it, and I did take a couple pages out.
Yeah. I'm kind of transitioning from comics to video games, and I kind of found out it's more of a passion when I was a kid, and nowadays, and I actually share that with nieces and nephews and all that. And so I've been on the hunt, and I mentioned in the chat, I do have a magazine like collectibles list that shows like first appearances, the issue, what country it's from, and the market value. I haven't really done a lot on it lately, but if anyone wants a copy of that, just let me know. My YouTube channel is for Birth the Nerd if you want to hit me up on there. But I was a big fan of Ocarina of Time. And the thing with just collectibles in general, as far as like video games are concerned, you have to like get into the Japanese part because that's basically where they come from, obviously, right? So this is Wiki Famitsu. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly, but it's supposedly the first appearance of Ocarina of Time. And when I opened it up, it had to get translator kind of deal. And it basically says this is the introduction of Nintendo 64's new video game, Ocarina of Time. How do you feel about it? It's pretty cool. Again, you wouldn't know looking at this cover. I mean, there's no mention of Zelda at all, period. But it's one of my favorite pieces here. I would say this is kind of my holy grail of the video game magazines I have so far. Now, this was another kind of deep dive, but you guys are all familiar, I'm sure, Electronic Gaming Monthly. Yep. Well, this is the first appearance of Sonic the Hedgehog in a American magazine. So there is
what is the date on that? I'm just curious.
This is August of 1990. It's Electronic Gaming Monthly number 13. And when you talk about CGC labeling stuff, this is what they say. It says, it's pretty descriptive. So it says, the Tokyo Toy Show article previews games releasing in Japan. Yeah, there's an early Sonic the Hedgehog preview in this magazine here. So
very cool. Back to that that Japanese magazine. I found that challenge as well, trying to decipher certain things. With I've got a number of copies of SI China, and it's all in Chinese. And even deciphering the volume and issue number can be really difficult because it's all in Chinese. So something to keep in mind if you're collecting any of the Asian publications like that. There are definitely some language barriers associated with it.
definitely.
I think it's worth mentioning too, like Ferd's talking about video games outside of sports, the market that has developed the most is video games, whether it's Nintendo Power, Electronic Gaming Monthly, Game Informer. There are more graded video game magazines. It'd be second. Well, maybe Playboy would be second place, third place at least, but huge market already.
Agreed. Tony, Ferd, was that all of yours?
Yeah, that's up.
Awesome. Yep. Cool. So, Tony, why don't you go back and we'll finish up some of yours. I'm going to answer a question while you're grabbing that. Victor Toombs asked, did CGC have any damage to their facilities in Milton? So I talked to somebody at CGC. They were shut down for Wednesday and Thursday that last week. They were back open on Friday. Did not get any reports of damage to their facilities. Of course, for those of you that don't know, they're in Sarasota. They are a little backed up just because they had to shut down for a couple of days and just dealing with all the issues with everything like that. So my guess is wait times and processing times for new stuff showing up in your account will be a little bit delayed.
Good to hear. I'm glad they didn't have a warehouse blow away.
Yeah, I think that, and keep in mind, CGC just built an additional additional facility, just like a huge, like almost 200,000 square foot building, and it just opened within the last year or two. And I remember talking to people there; it was very, very hurricane proof.
Sure.
And they've got vaults where all of this is stored in, so shouldn't be any issues, and I wouldn't expect any issues associated with that.
Awesome. Yeah, this is obviously I was very disappointed on this. I thought this was a 9A candidate, but the newest Sports Illustrated newsstand, Megan Fox. I don't think out of all of them, I think swimsuit issues are probably easier to find newsstands than anything else, than any of the regular issues. Would you agree with that, James?
I would agree, and I think that's just a usage issue. I think that if I'm not a regular Sports Illustrated newsstand purchaser, if there's one issue I'm going to buy every year, it's going to be the it's going to be the swimsuit issue, and I'm going to grab that off of the newsstand. So yes, you will see a lot of newsstand Sports Illustrated issues compared to the normal regular publication issues. Very cool. One more while you're going on to the next one. Let me get through some of these questions. Are there graded magazine dealers at sports card shows yet? Not many, especially local and regional shows. The National in Cleveland this year had more raw and graded Sports Illustrateds than I've ever seen at any other national. There was a lot there, in fact, for this hobby. I do know some guys that will bring a bunch out to their local or regional shows, but it's much more difficult to find there. I would expect in Chicago next summer for the National, there'll be even more magazines and slab magazines available.
Hopefully.
Oh, there's a 9.8.
9.8. I was so pumped about this. So
as you should be.
This is another education book. Sneaker Freaker started in 2002. It's actually an Australian magazine. It's not normal. Usually if there's foreign magazines, it's the foreign edition of a US magazine.
Right.
That did not happen with Sneaker Freaker. Sneaker Freaker has become the sneaker Bible and has maintained Australia as the publishing center. They do have other foreign editions. There's a Spanish edition, a Russian edition. I think there's a half a dozen other countries, not the US. But they also, similar to Slam, really cater to collectors from the beginning. They had 5,000 issues, arguably, either 3,000 or 5,000. It's the employees that disagree on that, but I'll say 5,000 copies of the first issue. The first 300 were hand numbered. I don't believe that. Oh, this is. So they were This is number 33.
That's perfect.
Out of the print run. They do variant covers. They do foil covers. They've done hologram covers. They had a scratch and sniff cover.
I love it.
They've done a lot of crazy collectible stuff. They had one that came with a poster. They've done homages. They've featured some hip hop people. There's an MF Doom cover. There's an Eazy-E cover. They're a lot of fun. It's a huge, cult market for sneakers.
Sure.
They've been selling raw for a lot of money for a long time. I think the first $1,000 sale was 10 years ago. No one else has started grading them yet. So I've started sending them in, snagged this 9.8 Miracle book. Super happy with that. Even if nobody else cares, nobody else knows what it is. I know.
Those are some of my favorite ones. Hey, I'm going to do something here while you're going to the next one. Somebody said, do you think swimsuit issues would be more collectible? So this will give me a chance to throw this off and give you my thoughts on swimsuit issues really quick. The modern swimsuit issues, I think the collectability is hurt by the print runs and the survivability. There's just a lot out there. I think vintage swimsuit issues have some more collectability. I think the ones with the big stars. I mean, if you can get a 9.8, the Kathy Ireland issue from the 80s, her first swimsuit cover appearance, I think that's a big deal. I think your other big-time supermodels like Cheryl Tiegs, this is Christy Brinkley's first swimsuit issue cover from 1979, graded at 9.4. I think, I'm going to scan the QR code while you're showing the next one, Tony, and see what it is. Sure. But I think this is still a Pop 1. So that's my thoughts on swimsuit issues. Lots of them out there. With the moderns, vintage has got a lot more collectability with the big supermodels that everybody's heard of.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think especially the big names, the Christy Brinkleys, the models that even though they're not in the news anymore, everyone's still aware who they are.
Yep, and this is still a Pop 1, none higher.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Love that.
So this is one I would love to be able to say first, but I don't know. Early, I'm going to say early, possibly first appearance of Mario on a cover. This was before any of his own video games, before Mario Brothers, before Super Mario, back when he was just a character in Donkey Kong. There was a Mario first appearance in comic books that is selling very well. That is only on the interior, but that is a few months after this. So far, we're going to call this the first. And, when it comes to video game characters, like you said, Ferd, I think if you have a video game magazine, that's more important in my mind than if they were featured in a comic book. They're not a comic book character, right? If you have I don't know. That's just my opinion. But
what's the year on that one, Tony?
This is 1983, January 1983.
Love it.
I'm going to follow up really quick because this looks like the same copy, but it's not. I think there was a 9.4 that I have, but the big thing on this one is down there in the bottom.
Love that sample copy.
A sample copy, so sent out just to, I assume, I don't know, magazine, bookstores,
advertisers, probably advertisers,
maybe electronics stores. I don't know.
Those are sometimes called proofs. So they're produced for in-house review by executives or creative people, and then they mark them up and give their changes and send them back before the final production run. A lot of times that's what it is as well.
Yeah, but again, kind of trying to start my own thing. I don't think any of these have even been graded before I sent these in, but
yeah. The population on my electronic game LT13 was 3. Oh no, sorry, 2.
See, and isn't that awesome? And that's why I love some of these things, because that really, that kind of goes to the heart of collecting. Is we want something that is rare and is not easy to get. And there's not a whole lot of niches where you can currently do that, and you can in magazines. I think everybody has this idea that vintage sports cards, especially, are super rare and super short run. that the famous 1932 Gaudy Babe Ruth. I think there's over 5,000 of those graded across the three major sports card grading companies. There's over 2,500 of the Mickey Mantle 52 tops. They're not rare. Now they're in high demand, sure.
Yeah.
But man, 2,500 of what is probably the most valuable or the second most valuable sports card in history in the 52 tops mantle. There's a lot of them out there, and so that's what I love. One of the things I love about this hobby is that you can get true rarity like that.
I do think. What do you think the census count will develop though? Obviously there's a lot of magazines out there in the world, right? You can go to any estate sale, you can go to any antique store. They're going to have some magazines. They're probably not going to be high grade, but I'm really curious 10 years from now, how many of these important ones are going to surface, are going to be discovered. Are we going to hit up to 1,000 of some of these, or are we going to max out at, if these big books only have 200 total graded ever, I'm curious about that. It'll be interesting.
So my thoughts on that are, I think certainly the pop counts are going to grow as the hobby grows, and I think PSA coming on board is going to be kind of a catalyst for growth for the hobby and push it forward. So we're going to see pop counts certainly grow. I think a couple things we got going for us is nobody, for the most part, thought magazines would ever be collectible. So the survivability of a lot of these is really low. And unlike sports cards, magazines were a tool. They were used. They were read. They were opened. They were left out on the counter. They had coffee spilled on them. They had other things that did to get them damaged. So I think that's going to hold it back a lot as well, especially when it comes to high grade pieces, just because nobody thought they were collectible. We are approaching our first 1,000 count sports card sports magazine, and that's the Victor Wembanyama first cover.
Sure.
But ultra moderns, we're going to get that. I mean, that thing's only a year old. Last time I checked, I think we were pushing almost 900 of those graded. And not a surprise. Not a surprise. Let's you give me 2 seconds here, Tony, so I can get a couple questions. Do you guys personally prefer? Oh, this is a great question. I'm sorry, I'm interrupting your unboxing because this is going to take feedback. No. Do you guys personally prefer your magazine collection signed or not? You guys weigh in on that. And I think, is there a difference between a sports magazine signed versus a comic signed? Talk about that a little bit.
I think personally for me, like a lot of magazines are glossy. And so you're not going to get unless you just really are careful or tell the person who's autographing your magazine, could you kind of go slow? So I don't really who would I get to sign a Sonic? Like the voice who does Sonic, that doesn't really appeal to me. Or how am I gonna get a Michael Jordan autograph? That's almost impossible. So personally, I don't care. For me, it's just more of oh man, you talk about I love the Source magazine because that was like my college days. I don't know how many subscriptions were in my fraternity bathroom that were just shredded, people reading them on the shitters or whatever. Yeah. So I'm more of the nostalgic piece. I like having magazines to grade and to read at the same time to take me back to that. So no, personally, I don't really hunt for the autographs personally. So.
Tony, what's your thoughts on that?
I think if it's a sports figure or a celebrity, I would say go for it. I mean, you don't generally stumble across signed books very often. But I think it does, it's not all about value, but the value of any sports figure, if it's a first appearance, is going to be higher if it's signed, and especially if it's certified or verified, authenticated. So yes, I would say for celebrities or sports figures, yes, I'm not as big a fan of getting things signed pop culture wise, or even on the comic side. I'm not as interested in having the artist sign something or the person who wrote it. I think for me, it's more meaningful if it's an actual celebrity or real figure.
My thought personally, I'm not a big autograph guy, never have been. And so it doesn't do a whole lot for my personal collection. For me, from a market standpoint, it was only very recently, and I'm talking the last couple of years, that autographed sports cards got any respect whatsoever. Forever in the sports card industry, if you had an autograph on a sports card, you ruined that sports card. That was not, now that's changed recently, and part of it is PSA authenticating, not only authenticating, but also giving a number grade to that auto. I don't know how much it does. So that's my personal opinion on it. From a market collectability standpoint, I don't know how much it does increase the value, and in fact may not it may decrease it. So I mean, great, give you an example. Hulk Hogan. There are a million Hulk Hogan autographs out there. The guy just can't go a week without signing 10,000 pieces of something. The market is flooded with Hulk Hogan autographs. So what does that bring to it? And if I've got Hulk Hogan's first Sports Illustrated cover from 1985 in a super high grade, and I get Hulk Hogan to autograph it, even if it's authenticated. And by the way, unauthenticated autographs, in my opinion, are not worth anything because there are so many fakes out there. But did you really increase the value of the collectible? If you take a high grade, like a 9.2 is the highest copy of Hogan's first Sports Illustrated, and there's 3 of them. If you get one of those autographed from Hulk Hogan, and his autograph is so flooded in the marketplace, have you improved the collectability of that piece? I don't know, and I don't think so. Now, if you get the same piece at 6.0 and get it autographed, then I think maybe you've increased the value of the piece. But for somebody like Hogan, where it's flooded, you're essentially, the way I would price it is, what's the value of a 6.0 unsigned? What's the value of his autograph? You add those two together, and that's the value of your magazine. I think there are rare instances where it's really kind of a force multiplier and doing a whole lot for your collectability. How is CGC treating inserts for magazines like the subscription mail-in stuff? Does it have to be included? The little subscription insert cards that come attached to the inside are fairly irrelevant. CGC sometimes notes if they're there or not. I haven't seen it affect collectability whatsoever. Larger inserts, if they are no longer in there, and what's a larger insert? Sometimes there were sports magazines had some posters of athletes in there. A lot of times what the inserts are advertising inserts, either cologne was a big one. You know, and the insert would smell. You could open it up and you'd smell like Tricard Noir. If those are missing, you're much more likely to get a green label on that because the insert isn't there. The FC of Mahomes has a well-known flaw growing across the front horizontally. How much of a deduction is that? That's what's called and you're right about that. That is a known flaw. That's called a roller mark. It happens during the printing process because that is a manufacturing error and not a user error. CGC is much more forgiving on those. So I'm not going to say, even with that flaw, with everything perfect, you'll get a 9.8, but you'd certainly get a 9.6 with that. Okay, good. I wanted to go through those. Tony, what else you got?
Sure.
If anything.
Yeah. I'll 2 last ones. This was actually not from the box. It was Brandon. I could talk about magazines for 20 hours. So
me too. So either of you guys got to go,
Yeah.
because I could sit on this live until 1 o'clock in the morning and do this.
I do have to actually end up.
Okay.
I gotta go. Went a little over, but I had a great time, man. I mean, the chat again. You guys were awesome. Thanks for having me on the show. I'll see you guys in the chat, and
appreciate you doing this, Ferd. I really appreciate it, man. And we'll have to do this again sometime soon.
It's good to see you, Ferd.
Yeah, take care, guys. See you.
All right, see you. All right, Tony. Me and you. We're pulling an all-nighter. Let's do it.
Let's do this.
I love this one. I think you showed this one off in our Instagram private chat that we've got going.
Yep.
I loved it.
Yep. Up in the corner. This is Animation Magazine #1, 1987. Up there, you see the first cover appearance, probably the first appearance as well of The Simpsons. This was during, they were a cartoon short on the Tracy Ullman Show.
Yep.
For a couple of years before they got their own TV show. So this was the Tracy Ullman era. Again, in my opinion, Matt Groening and The Simpsons is probably the biggest animation IP since Mickey Mouse, since Walt Disney.
I don't think you're going to get many people that would argue with that at all. It's nothing, not only for its cultural relevance, but also its massive staying power, staying power.
Yeah. And considering this is a #1, I don't know who this was marketed to, if this was something that showed up at Barnes & Noble, if this was marketed to people in the industry. There don't seem to be a ton of them out there. There's about half a dozen on the market right now. It's been a known commodity. I was one of the first. I don't know. I'm not going to take. We as a group discovered it maybe a year and a half ago, and since then it's kind of blossomed on the market. But that's an
interesting. My guess is that's a trade publication. I don't know that. I'm just guessing that was for people that worked in the movie and animation industry. I have a guy that sent me. It's been a little while now, but he sent me a ton of movie industry. He's a camera guy, works in the movie industry. And he has a ton of ultra cool covers that are trade publications specifically to people who are camera operators and work in the movie industry that have these major stars, Sylvester Stallone and Robert De Niro and all these amazing actors on the cover. And I pressed those for him and he got them graded. I just thought they were the coolest things ever.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I'm going to give a little cornbread for anybody watching. The Animation Magazine it still does come out today. There are new releases. If you go on their website, you can buy vintage, you can buy backstock. You're not going to find any of issue number 1, but all the way back to the early 90s, you can find some early appearances of some major cartoon IP. There's a Batman Beyond, the Spirited Away. There's an early South Park that's on there. You can still buy those copies for about $8 or $10 a piece.
I'm going to interrupt you again to do a couple of things because I'm on this really big Slam magazine kick right now, and somebody in the chat, Eric, mentioned that it's interesting that Slam came out before Sports Illustrated for Wemby. As it relates to ultra modern pieces, I'm talking about stuff that's coming out right now. Slam is, from a collectability standpoint, Slam is crushing Sports Illustrated. I mean, what Slam is doing for collectors is so much more interesting than Sports Illustrated. And I think I mentioned this in my recent unboxing video. Sports Illustrated produces about 15 issues a year. Maybe at most I find 3 that I'll purchase to get graded. Right. At most 3, and 2 of those 3 are just mildly interesting to me. Slam is the most interesting and doing the best job for collectors for modern pieces right now. Now, go back even 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years, Sports Illustrated dominates that era in the marketplace. For modern stuff, Slam is crushing it.
Yeah. I think that pattern is going to hold, though, just because Slam has so many issues for obviously basketball people. If there's 4 or 5 issues every single month, Wembanyama, Cooper Flag, they're all going to show up on Flag or on Slam before they show up on Sports Illustrated. There might be a few exceptions, but
absolutely. Slam will have, for basketball, because Slam is strictly basketball, Slam, there's no way that Sports Illustrated is ever going to put a basketball athlete on a cover before Slam does, because Slam is putting them on. They put high school players on. They're putting these freshman college players on, and that's just not Sports Illustrated's game right now.
Yep.
Shame. It's too bad. And Sports Illustrated no longer producing weekly. It was different when Sports Illustrated was putting out 52 to 60 issues a year.
You'd get more college covers.
Right, exactly. They're down to about 15 issues a year, so you're just not getting that. Are you guys reducing your submissions to CGC in order to be first to hit high grades with PSA? X95 Natty. So my strategy is, and Tony, I think we talked about this earlier in the show, you're kind of taking a wait and see attitude on PSA. Here's my view on PSA. I'm absolutely going to be trying them out and be submitting on day 1 that they open for submissions. And I'm not going to say I'm reducing the number of issues I'm getting graded, but I am strategically holding back certain ones that I'm sitting here going, okay, this is going to be an early PSA grade for me. And I may have multiple copies of it and send one to CGC, but in the past when I just send everything to CGC, there is a little bit more strategy going into it now, and I am holding stuff back that I'm waiting for. I've got a huge stack of slabbed issues that I'm going to crack, press, and regrade, and I'm waiting for PSA for all of those. So,
I'm sitting on a stack of Jordan magazines. They're not the super premium ones, but that would be a good stack to get pressed and send into PSA in the beginning.
And to clarify, and that's a good strategy. And to clarify my point, they're not necessarily all the most valuable issues. I don't know how people are going to view PSA. PSA may not be successful in this. Now, I think they're setting themselves up to do a lot of things right and to be successful. And I think that their track record in the sports memorabilia collecting space gives them just an insane amount of credibility. But they could crap the bed on this thing. And as Elon Musk likes to say, the probability of PSA crapping the bed is not zero. To steal a quote from him that he just used this weekend with their heavy Falcon launch. So let that enter into your strategy as well. It's not necessarily all the most expensive stuff that I'm holding back, but I am holding back some stuff for strategic reasons. Okay, what else you got, Tony?
Sure. I'll save some for another show because I could talk about this stuff all day long.
I'm so glad you brought this one, because you've been sharing pics of this in the chat in our Instagram private group chat that we've got going on for a long time, and I'm fascinated by this piece.
I honestly think this is probably my favorite magazine that I own right now. Oddly enough, having nothing to do with the Barbie movie necessarily, but I stumbled across this. Half Price Books is not a national chain, but that I'm aware of.
But they're pretty well distributed. Yeah, I mean, okay. I'm familiar with Half Price Books. Maybe a Midwest thing.
Yeah, I stumbled across a large stack, probably 25, 30 copies of this Barbie magazine. Had never heard of it before. Had never seen it. All the covers look like they're straight out of Mad Men, like just the art style, the colors that they use, just gorgeous vintage 60s. This is 1961. And in discovering it and digging into it, this came out 2 years after the doll was released.
Okay.
This came out a year and a half before the first Dell comic book, which is considered the first publication or first Barbie appearance per se. So again, early versus first. In my mind, this is the first issue. This was not a newsstand issue. Every one of these was sent out to Barbie fan club members. So everyone has a mailing label. I have one that doesn't have a mailing label, but inside of that one, it had a letter from the Barbie people saying, "I'm sorry that your copy was lost in the mail. We sent you a new copy."
Interesting. Fascinating. I love little pieces of provenance like that. And I love the fact that they put the mailing label on the back. Oh, yes. That's awesome, because it keeps that cover in a visually pristine image. And I love it. You said that's 61. The graphic design of that just screams late 50s, early 60s. And I love that from a visual standpoint. And then obviously the collectability of Barbie is, can't be argued by anybody. That's a great piece. Great piece.
Yeah. The first issue is just striking. They're all really good. A lot of them there's some stories in there. But some of them do have activities, just like the old Scholastic, kids magazines.
Yep.
So finding ones that aren't cut to pieces, that don't have some dress that you cut out and put on a doll, finding them intact is a little hard. There are 2 of these graded. I've got the 3rd copy at CGC right now. I'm the only one who's graded one so far. This is the top pop, so 4.5. But in my mind, I look at comic books from this era. What comic books came out in the early 60s? Fantastic Four, Black Panther, Spider-Man. How important are those? How big are those IPs, right? How does Barbie compare in recognizability? I have no idea what the actual value, we don't get into values, and we won't really know values, I think, for most magazines for another 5 to 10 years. But
agreed.
In my mind, this is my most important piece. I love it. I love it.
And I think it's very interesting. So traditionally, collectibles have been a male-dominated hobby. And the number of women that have entered in, similar to video games, dudes played video games. Well, the number of young women that are playing video games now is huge. And the number of women that are getting into collectibles, it keeps growing and growing. And women's sports and their collectability, obviously with Caitlin Clark and the WNBA keeps growing. I think that is, look, the fact of the matter is female-based collectibles, either collectibles that are driven by the female consumer or collectibles that feature females like Caitlin Clark. The fact of the matter is, wherever they're at today, they're going to be even much more popular in 5 or 10 years. So I'm a big fan of that piece for so many reasons. Love it.
Yeah.
Love it.
No,
All right. Do you still have more?
I've got more, but I think I probably should say
you've got enough. Okay. I've got a few to show and tell that people have maybe seen before, but I still love showing them off. But I want to run through a ton of questions because the chat's been great. Any thoughts on Sports Illustrated that are from the late 40s and are roughly the size of Life magazine? So Sports Illustrated as a brand name for a publication did exist before the Sports Illustrated that we know today. The Sports Illustrated we know today first got published August 16th, 1954. Dell Publications published a magazine called Sports Illustrated. There have been several incarnations from going back as early as the 30s. I don't know how the market and collectors see that, if they're viewed as true Sports Illustrated issues. If they're roughly the same size of Life magazine, that is going to crush the collectability because they're too big to be graded. So bummer on that one. Sorry.
Can I ask you a question about that, Jim?
Yeah.
I've seen a couple of those, but were they like the early regular Sports Illustrated where it was sportsman featured, where you'd have fishing and sailing, or were they focused on actual athletes?
They were much more athlete focused, and I'm pulling something up right now. So I had a chance to meet a fellow Sports Illustrated collector in person recently, and he brought something with him, and I took some photos of it, and I haven't had a chance to post them on social media yet. And but I took some photos of it. So I've got a copy of a magazine called Sports Illustrated from January 1936 that has I don't know if this is, let's try. This is the most jacked up rigged thing I'm doing, showing a photo of my phone. It's got a hockey player on the cover. So that's from 1936, and it's got stories about the Rose Bowl, Lee Patrick's comeback, and Langford versus Lewis in boxing. And this is Paul Bartlett Taylor. I'm not a vintage hockey guy, so I don't know anything about that. But I believe that is the oldest known copy of a publication with the name Sports Illustrated going back to 1936. And again, I don't know of the size of that one, but again, it's been proven time and time again. As soon as anything can be collectible, but until a third-party company comes along and grades it, it's going to be hamstrung in its, viability and marketplace collectability, beyond just a small group of people. ASMR people, what's your opinion on non-mainstream sports mags with cool covers? I love SI, but I'm a bit of a value shopper. I enjoy early covers that predate the first SI appearance. So my personal opinion, and then what I see happening in the market. My personal opinion is I love sticking to well-known brand name publications. I stick to Sports Illustrated, Slam, Newsweek, Time. That is, and graded game programs. That's 99% of everything I have. Beyond that, something has to be interesting for me to collect it. Something has to, that Barbie that you just showed, I'm in love with that piece all day long. That's interesting to me. So there are so many, both national, regional, and local sports publications out there that I think for me, it just isn't interesting. And I think the market is showing something similar. Now, will the market change and all of a sudden they'll fall in love with that Mirror Sports magazine that I talked about earlier that had Jordan on the cover in his Carolina uniform? Maybe. I don't know. But everything outside of those really well-known, well-respected publications tends to be speculative right now.
You've talked about that before in your channel, and I think a good equivalent that you mentioned was with sports cards. With most of the major rookie cards, you can find cards that predate that, whether they're from college, maybe a lesser-known manufacturer of cards. But that Topps card or that Donruss card or that Fleer card is just recognized more. And I think magazines are kind of the same way, that the brand matters, and it's going to matter with the market forever. Not to say those earlier ones can't, develop a market of their own, but I can't see them matching the SI.
Yeah, and there are, the market decides this, and the market is this big beast that kind of just goes in directions that sometimes don't make any sense. And you're right. The 52 Topps mantle is the best example. It's not his rookie card. There's a 51 Bowman Mickey mantle that is nowhere near as collectible as the Topps one. So why is that Topps mantle better than the 51 Bowman when the Bowman is truly his rookie card? It's just the way the market makes decisions, and sometimes logic doesn't always follow that.
I'm going to show this. I'm going to show this really quick, just because it addresses that
Please
exact question. This is
there's
not
a great
a
example.
mainstream magazine. Fantasy football and fantasy basketball magazines, just for the hell of it, I've been chasing some of the early ones. Obviously, Jordan on the cover, not collectible at all. You can probably find copies for $10. My thinking on fantasy is everybody who bought them, most people wrote in them, crumpled them up. You brought them to a draft and you destroyed them, right? So the number of copies that have survived. This isn't a first by any means, but again, just a different title. It's interesting. It's not valuable.
Yeah, and don't misconstrue what I've said, and I'm glad you showed that, Tony. I'm not a gatekeeper. I encourage you to collect whatever you think is cool. God knows I've got some stuff that nobody else gives a crap about than me, that I just think they're cool. I was just speaking from a marketplace value standpoint. Keep that in mind. But man, I'm not a big fan of subscription Sports Illustrated issues. But anybody that wants to collect a subscription Sports Illustrated issue, I'll cheer you on and help you as much as I can. So collect whatever you like. Any soccer magazine slabs? Never seen any. What is the main title? The main title is still Sports Illustrated, and there are still some, Pele's first cover from 75, the Maradona from 86. There's some modern ones that are interesting. The Messi and the Ronaldo from 2014, all very collectible. I think what I've found, and because I've got a number of customers of mine that I press for that are international. Shocking, actually. I've got guys that I press for in England and Italy, Dubai, and they're all big soccer guys. And so what I find is that it's really driven. Soccer is driven by either the Sports Illustrateds that I talked about or oddball foreign publications. Some of these guys in Italy sent me a bunch of whatever Italian publication. I couldn't read it. It was in Italian, and it's got these soccer stars on it. So I think that's a little bit different. We've covered this already, but I'll make it again. Victor Toombs, when does PSA start grading? Will they have the same grade scale they have for cards? No. Q1 2025. They will have the same grading scale as CGC, and that is, half point increments, 8.0, 8.5, 9.0, up to 9.0, and then they will go 9.2, 9.4, 9.6. I believe they'll go 9.9 and 10.0, which is the CGC scale. PSA has told me that they will be giving out PSA 10s in magazines. They view that as important. They view that the PSA 10 is a brand in and of itself that's known in the collectible market, and I'm not going to argue with them on that. But make sure you understand the difference between grading scale and grading standards. They will use the same grading scale as CGC, 9.0, 9.2, 9.4. They may not use the same grading standards. So what it will take to get a PSA 10 is probably going to be easier to get a PSA 10 magazine than it is to get a CGC 10 magazine or comic. That's my guess.
Yeah. And that's the part that worries me, as we talked about before. I'm concerned about how the market will view that, and
all of this is speculation. We don't know. We've got little bits of information, and I get little bits of information from the source at PSA, but they've been changing their mind on a lot of stuff, which is what happens in business. Businesses come up with these ideas, takes a year or two to develop. When you start, you think you're going one way, and you end up at the end of it by going in a different way. I believe PSA will be grading Life magazines early. They will not be grading Life magazines early. They have come out and flat out said that they will have one slab for everything. That includes comics. the size of the slab from what I've been told so far is going to be the same size for comics than it is for magazines. They will not have a larger format one that will grade Treasury comics or Life magazines or the most Rolling Stones.
I think it's a matter of time, though, before some company comes out with that. There are companies doing things outside of publications where they basically make custom, you can get a Nintendo 64 whole system encased in plastic.
Yeah.
And you might pay $240 for that
right,
grading,
because it's a custom sized case that they're going to have to build,
right?
They're not and they're not really able to scale that up because there's just not a whole lot of new in the box and Nintendo 64s getting graded.
Right.
I don't know if it'll happen. Here's where it'll come from. It'll be driven by Treasury comics. The Treasury comic collectors have been saying for years, give us a slab, give us a slab, give us a slab, and nobody has given them a slab. Treasury comics will drive that. And so until Treasury comics get their own size slab, there's no way oversized sports publications are getting their size slab. I'm going to run through some of mine, then I'm going to show off really quick. I talked about Slam Magazine. These are just some that I'm proud of. This is Michael Jordan's first Slam Magazine cover appearance. Came out in July 1995. It's graded at 9.8. It's a pop 1, none higher.
That's awesome.
Love that one. Big fan of Slam. This is another one I'm showing off. Steve Jobs' first Time Magazine cover appearance. This is February 15th, 1982. This is newsstand. There's a lot of subscription issues out there, but this is newsstand. It is clean as hell with that 9.0, and that is also a pop 1, none higher.
Very cool.
Back to PSA. Not sure which publications that PSA is going to be grading. CGC, to their credit, grades anything pretty much that fits in the slab. I know as recent as 3 or 4 months ago, PSA was only going to start off by grading Time and Sports Illustrated. But then I've heard some things that they'll be grading some other stuff. So not quite sure what publications PSA will be accepting on day one. First copy of Sports Illustrated, August 16th, 1954. This is graded at 9.8. I'll tell the quick story. I've done this a lot on my YouTube channel, but if there are people in here that haven't heard this before, Sports Illustrated, every one of these is considered newsstand because even the ones that were married, people that subscribed to this before it was, first issue was delivered, they were mailed out in an envelope with the address label on the outside. So there's no way to tell what's a newsstand and what's a subscription. So they're all newsstand. Sports Illustrated hung on to the overrun of these boxes and boxes of these in a warehouse for 30 or 40 years. And then they started selling them in the marketplace for like $300, $400, $500. They ran ads in Sports Illustrated. So there are a ton of these in the marketplace. There are a ton in high grades. I think we're approaching almost 100 copies of this at 9.8. It is still extremely collectible and extremely in high demand because there are people that don't collect graded magazines that want this because it's the very first copy of Sports Illustrated. And it's so old. And
isn't it the highest census count of any?
It used to be. Wembanyama has eclipsed it, I believe. Okay. The Wembanyama first cover has eclipsed it. This is another one that's shown up, I post this on social media any chance I get. In fact, did recently with the Shohei Ohtani 50-50 baseball that's currently being auctioned on Golden, which is, as of right now, the second most expensive baseball in collectible history. This recognizes the most expensive baseball in collectible history, which is Mark McGwire's 70th home run ball, which was infamously purchased by comic book legend Todd McFarlane for $3 million in 1999, an outrageous, ridiculous sum of money. And Todd caught a lot of crap for overpaying for that, but he's pretty happy with it. This is Signature Series, 9.2, but that's not Mark McGwire's signature. That's Todd McFarlane's signature. Which I just think this is the coolest thing ever to have the 70th home run issue. And Todd McFarlane can be a little squirrely as to what he signs. And I sent this into the CGC private signing they had a year or so ago. And I thought for certain I was going to get this sent back, but he signed it. So good That's for him awesome. For being a good sport. And I just love goofy one-off stuff like that.
I was going to say, you don't see a lot of gold label Sports Illustrated.
You never see them because there's never any CGC facilitators and witness at sports card shows. Yeah. Now, because because
Well-
CGC is now authenticating autographs on sports cards, you will see facilitators and witnesses at more sports card shows going forward.
And there are more and more athletes showing up at comic conventions as well.
Especially
whole-
wrestlers. Especially
Yeah.
wrestlers. I got a couple really nice Ron Simmons and Lex Luger signature series pieces at a Comic-Con in Detroit that I went to a few years ago and was
Awesome.
able to snag those. But yes, you are seeing more athletes, especially wrestlers. All right, I'm going to tell a bit of a story on this one and kind of set the stage about how I see collectibles in general. So Jeremy Lin, this is Jeremy Lin's first Sports Illustrated cover. It's from February 20th, 2012. It's graded at 9.6. I think this is still a Pop 1, none higher. And I love showing this one off because it helps me tell the story and explain about kind of some core things with collectibles. Sports cards, which is the 800-pound gorilla, is really a fairly transactional collectible. And sports cards don't do a great job at telling a story. The photos are fairly generic and very difficult to source, and that's fine. This is Mickey Mantle's 1966 tops. This is what it's worth in the marketplace. It tends to be fairly a transactional thing. And what I think is so awesome about magazines, and you're seeing this really with Game Worn, we can do things that sports cards can't. Storytelling, much better storytelling, but also moments, collectibles of moments. Sports cards, if it's Mickey Mantle's 1966 tops, it's really irrelevant what Mickey Mantle did in 1966. It's just an early, it's just a vintage Mickey Mantle card. Jeremy Lin has virtually no collectability as an athlete, but he has a lot of collectability as it relates to those 3 months during Linsanity when he was the greatest basketball player in the world, out of nowhere, from a journeyman, what would be a G League player now, to just lighting it up and, dropping 40 points and winning games over Kobe Bryant. And Game Worn is really showing this as well. Game Worn is all about moments. Yeah, a LeBron jersey, any LeBron jersey is definitely collectible, but a LeBron jersey where he dropped 60 that night, or obviously a finals LeBron jersey or something else, it tells the story and it's more about the moment. There's no collectability in sports cards for the 1980 U.S. Olympic hockey team in the Miracle on Ice. That's a shame. That's a shame. So sports cards suck at moments. Magazines and Game Worn do a much better job at being able to collect those moments. And I think this is a great example of this, because to me, this is really collectible. And if you haven't seen that Jeremy Lin documentary, it's awesome. And that was such a fun story that took place with Linsanity. And I think that's really interesting. Now, I will say, smart on Topps, and what Topps has done with their Topps Now product, they finally have a way to get into the collectability of moments. They've been doing this for a few years now, where something will happen, and they'll issue a card that you can go online and buy, and they sell as many. Now, the print runs are through the roof. I'm trying to think of I think the last big Topps moment was the U.S. Olympic basketball team from this summer. They issued a card based on that. And smart on Topps, there's going to be a 1-of-1 superfractor autograph or some crap in there too. They sold 600,000 of them, I believe. So the print runs are crazy, which drives down the collectability. But I just wanted to point that out because I think that's so cool. And I think that's a really big difference.
Jumping back to what we said earlier, what we talked about earlier, of where the crossover is between magazines and comics, it makes me think Brian McClay, who's in our little group of Mag Spies, but he does a lot of his own content. He talks about the word nostalgia a lot. Nostalgia drives collecting. And I think nostalgia is something that is a big differentiator between magazines and sports cards. You remember that, watching games with your dad. You remember going to that playoff game. You remember the experiences and concerts and things. I mean, you were a fan of a player, but that experience of watching those games with Jeremy Lin and that feeling you get, Yeah, I think that ties into, what you were talking about. The telling the story. Nostalgia is much stronger.
Agreed. And the sports card has a problem bringing that nostalgia up, or doesn't bring it up to the degree that other collectibles do.
Yeah.
I think that's why graded game tickets are so interesting. Again, because the story's told on the slab, but I can sit here and I can get a graded game ticket of the first game I went to. And that means nothing to anybody else but me. There's not that similar thing in sports cards. Again, a 57 Topps mantle is just a 57 Topps mantle. It has trouble telling a story, and it has trouble specifying any specific moment from that 1957 season, or any sort of specific moment from Mickey Mantle's career, or any story associated with his career.
Yeah, they're more like currency. It's like, this piece of paper is worth this much money. Here's a $100 Wembanyama card. Here's a $5 Wembanyama card. It's transactional. It's less, less life to it.
Yep, agreed. Victor Toombs, how will PSA be treating signed magazines? Just like any other signed piece at PSA, you can pay extra to get that signature authenticated through their in-house authenticated program. And then Hector said, just got my Topps Now. Shohei 3 home run game today, less than 4K made. So that one didn't have as much. The big ones, and I think they might have even done a Topps Now for his 50-50. Yeah, some of those are going to have much lower print runs. The really, really popular ones had just ginormous print runs. Okay, I'm going to wrap this up with just one that I can't stop showing to everybody. This is the... Oh, I'm getting light burn. There we go. Got to turn my light because it's shining it out. This is a 9.9 Caitlin Clark Slam magazine. I was blown away when I got this. For those of you that don't know, the grading scale does go above 9.8. Up until 6 or 8 months ago, there had never been a copy of any sports magazine in the tens and tens of thousands that have been graded. There'd never been one that had ever gotten anything above a 9.8. There was a Sports Illustrated cover of Kylian Mbappe that got a 9.9. There is a PSA magazine with Willie Mays on the cover that's got a 9.9. And then there's this Caitlin Clark for Slam cover at 9.9. It's the only copy of any Slam magazine that's ever been produced to get a 9.9. And I just keep showing it off because I think it's freaking awesome. And
the 9.9 is like the sun. If you look at it, you'll go blind. So
you'll go blind. That's why I'm getting that light burn from my ring light to where you can barely see it. But you're right. Awesome. By the way, if you were to ever get a 10, it's also printed in gold as well. Tony, this was awesome. I had a ton of fun. Our chat was great. We had a bunch of people watching. We went way over, which it always seems we do in these sorts of things. I planned for 45 minutes for an hour, and we went for 2 hours. I appreciate it, man.
Honestly, like I said, whether it's chatting, every opportunity I get to take a little break from work, I jump on and try to either source new magazines or look into what values are, or talk with you guys online. I love the hobby, love learning stuff about it, love learning tips and tricks. I think we all have a lot of things we can share knowledge with each other, and share knowledge with viewers. There's so many opportunities to get out there and find these gems, these, you can discover things that we don't even know about yet.
Absolutely.
It is amazing.
There's a ton that is still to be discovered out there. Absolutely. Stories and little nuggets of collectability in sports magazines to be discovered. You're exactly right about that. And I love talking to comic guys like you and Ferd and everybody else in our group because that's not where that's not my basis. I don't come from the comic world, and you guys have been doing this, graded comics for 25 years now, and has such a big jump on graded sports magazines. So I learned a ton from you guys as well. So I appreciate everything.
The one saying that I was going to mention it earlier, but the one saying that we throw around in comics when we're comparing comics to the sports arena is that Spider-Man is never going to snap an Achilles tendon. And Superman is never going to have, get arrested for, soliciting. So it's a little safer than the sports arena. We've seen some things, that used to have value that don't have value anymore because of certain events. But
yeah, talk to me about my Trevor Lawrence first covers at 9.8 that were worth a lot a year or two ago. That with his performance on the field this year with the Jaguars, not so much. But you're exactly right. That's a great point. Don't have to worry about injuries on prospects.
Exactly.
My nightmare would be Cooper Flagg ends up, tearing an ACL here in his first year at Duke or something, goes Greg Odom where he gets drafted and just his knees can't tolerate it. And, he never becomes anything. So, Tony, really appreciate it. Shout out to Ferd, who had to leave earlier. Tony, where can people find you on social media?
I don't have a huge presence, but I am on Instagram. I like showing things that I'm sending off to CGC. I've got many submissions, actually, a set of 19 vintage magazines. I cannot wait to get that back. Some great stuff from the 30s, 40s, just awesome. So yeah, Instagram, Blue Green Artifacts is my moniker on most areas. I don't like to push eBay too much. I don't ever want to jump on YouTube and try to push people to go buy some of my stuff.
Yeah.
But I am there. I'm gonna just to say goodbye. I know we're a little bit early, but I want to wish everybody a happy Halloween.
Nice. So what is that? Tell me what that is.
So Mondo is a collectibles company. They specialize in prints. They do limited edition prints, variant print runs from 20 copies of a poster to 150. They are a hardcore collectible company, and they've ventured outside of prints a little bit into action figures. They had a monthly magazine for about 3 years. Each issue was kind of a feature on some IP. So there was an Aliens issue. There was a Tim Burton cover. There's a Halloween cover. There was a Pixar issue. Star Wars has had a few. They're just fun. They're beautiful art pieces more than anything. They aren't early. They came out, maybe 12 years ago or so. But they're fun. They're a little hard to find. They'd look great in slabs. So
hey, and that's a huge part of the collectability of all these things is they display so well, and so the visual aspect of it is a big part of it. I'm glad you showed that one. Thanks for watching. Thanks for being in the chat. We had a great chat. This will be available on demand on my YouTube channel. Appreciate it, Tony. We'll do one of these again. Who knows? Sometime again.
Thanks, Jim.
Thanks, Tony. Thanks, everybody.